This isn't just a ghost tale. It's a chilling account of a family tormented by an unseen, malevolent force. We're talking objects flying across rooms, mysterious pools of water appearing from nowhere, and a terrifying entity that made its presence known in the most horrifying ways. So, lock your doors, turn down the lights, and get ready to meet the entity that terrorized a small house in West Yorkshire and left a mark on paranormal history forever. Our story begins in August 1966 in a modest council house at 30 East Drive, Pontefract. The Pritchard family, Joe and Jean, their son Philip, who was 15, and their daughter Diane, 12, had just returned from a holiday. They were a completely normal working-class family with no prior interest or belief in the paranormal. Their holiday calm was shattered almost immediately. While the parents were out, Philip and his grandmother were in the kitchen when a fine, chalk-like dust began to fall from the ceiling. There was no explanation. They cleaned it up, bewildered, but it was only the beginning. Soon after, pools of water started mysteriously appearing on the kitchen floor. The Pritchards called plumbers and builders, who were all baffled. They couldn't find any leaks or logical sources for the water. The puddles would appear and disappear without a trace. Then, things escalated. A loud crashing noise came from the hall. They found the dispenser for their tea caddy. A heavy ceramic object had been smashed. This wasn't just things falling. It felt deliberate. The activity seemed to center around Diane, the 12-year-old daughter. The unseen entity was soon given a nickname by the family, Fred. At first, it was a way to make light of the unsettling events, a coping mechanism. But Fred was no friendly ghost. The phenomena grew more aggressive. Heavy furniture like a solid oak sideboard would be overturned. Green foam would seep from faucets and even the toilet. Photographs were slashed with razors. Light bulbs would shatter, and the family would be hit by unseen hands. One of the most common and bizarre occurrences was the relentless banging and knocking that echoed through the house day and night, keeping the family in a constant state of fear and exhaustion. Things took a much darker turn. Fred started communicating. Scrawled, often abusive messages would appear on the walls and on notepads. The entity seemed to have a personality, a cruel, vindictive one. It enjoyed tormenting the family, particularly John, the mother. It would rip her gloves to shreds, throw eggs at her, and subject her to constant psychological warfare. The house became a living nightmare. Neighbors started to notice the strange occurrences too, hearing the loud bangs and sometimes witnessing objects moving on their own through the windows. The Pritchards were no longer alone in their terror. The whole community was becoming aware of the haunting at 30 East Drive. The physical attacks became more severe and terrifying. Diane was often the target of the entity's worst violence. On one occasion, she was dragged kicking and screaming up the stairs by an invisible force, her hair standing on end. The attack left red hand marks on her throat. Another time, the family watched in horror as she was levitated from her bed. These weren't just bumps in the night. This was a direct, physical assault by something they couldn't see. The family was desperate. They were exhausted, terrified, and felt completely helpless against this invisible tormentor. The poltergeist's activities were so persistent and well documented that they attracted the attention of paranormal investigators. One of the most prominent investigators to study the case was Colin Wilson, a respected author and researcher. He, along with other investigators, spent countless hours at 30 East Drive, witnessing the phenomena firsthand. They saw objects fly, heard the disembodied coughs and growls, and felt the sudden, inexplicable drops in temperature. They tried to debunk it, looking for wires, hidden devices, or any sign of a hoax. They found nothing. The evidence was overwhelming. Something truly unexplainable was happening in that house. The investigators documented everything. They recorded the loud, rhythmic banging that would often start on cue. They photographed the mysterious puddles and the green foam. They were there when the entity would manipulate objects, sometimes even seeming to play games with them, moving items just out of reach or hiding them in plain sight. But the playful moments were rare. More often, the atmosphere was thick with malice. The investigators themselves reported feeling an oppressive, heavy presence in the house, a feeling of being watched by something deeply malevolent. They concluded that this was not a simple haunting. The intelligence and sheer force displayed pointed to something far more sinister. So who or what was this entity? The name, the Black Monk of Pontefract, didn't come from the Pritchard family. It came later, from theories developed by investigators. They researched the history of the land the house was built on. They discovered that across the road from 30 East Drive once stood the town gallows, and near that site was a Cluniac monastery dating back to the 11th century. Local legend told of a monk from that monastery who, in the 16th century, had committed a heinous crime against a young girl and was subsequently hanged for it at the gallows. The theory was that the entity tormenting the Pritchards was the vengeful spirit of this disgraced monk. This would explain the entity's apparent hatred towards the female members of the family, particularly the young Diane. The descriptions of the entity, when it was briefly glimpsed, also matched this theory. On a few rare occasions, family members and investigators reported seeing a dark, shadowy figure, often described as wearing a long black robe, resembling a monk's habit. This terrifying figure would appear for a fleeting moment before vanishing, leaving a wave of cold and terror in its wake. The Black Monk had a name and a story. The haunting continued for years, but it wasn't constant. It would come in waves, with periods of intense, violent activity, followed by weeks or even months of relative calm. Then, just as the family thought it was over, Fred would return with a vengeance. After several years of torment, the activity finally began to subside. By the late 1960s, the violent phenomena had largely ceased, though a sense of presence lingered in the house for years to come. The Pritchard family eventually moved out, but the story of what they endured never left them. So, what do we make of all this? Was it a hoax? The sheer number of witnesses, including skeptical investigators, police officers, and neighbors, makes a simple hoax explanation incredibly difficult to believe. The Pritchards gained nothing from this. They were a private family who were thrust into the spotlight and faced ridicule. They endured years of genuine terror. The consistency of the phenomena, documented over a long period, points to something real. Could it have been a poltergeist centered on the adolescent Diane? This is a common theory in paranormal circles, that the psychokinetic energy of a teenager, often unconsciously, can cause physical disturbances. This could explain why the activity was so focused around her. However, it doesn't fully account for the intelligent communication, the historical connections, or the sightings of the robed figure. This entity seemed to have its own identity, its own history, and its own cruel agenda. Many researchers, including Colin Wilson, came to believe that the haunting of 30 East Drive was not a ghost or a typical poltergeist, but something demonic. The religious overtones, the specific targeting of the family, the vile messages, and the sheer malevolence of the entity all point toward a non-human, inhuman intelligence. It seemed to feed on the family's fear, growing stronger and more audacious with every scream and every tear. The house at 30 East Drive still stands today, and it remains one of the most infamous haunted locations in the world. It has been the subject of books, documentaries, and even a horror film called When the Lights Went Out. Paranormal teams still visit, hoping to capture evidence of the Black Monk, and many report experiencing unexplained phenomena, from strange noises to feeling an oppressive negative energy. The legacy of the Black Monk of Pontefract is a stark reminder that there are forces in this world that we don't understand. Forces that can invade our homes and our lives, turning them into a living hell. The Pritchard family's ordeal serves as one of the most compelling and terrifying true ghost stories ever told. Thank you for joining me on this deep dive into the darkness of Pontefract. What do you think was tormenting the Pritchard family? A ghost, a poltergeist, or something else entirely? Let me know your theories in the comments below. And if you enjoy exploring the world's most terrifying true stories, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you do not miss our next chilling investigation. Stay safe, and whatever you do, don't invite Fred in.